unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100 million Kalpas, having yet to hear, accept, and maintain. May I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. So the topic of this talk is responsiveness, or maybe it should be Zen responsiveness. And I want to relate to a common distinction between being reactive and being responsive. So what's going on in this distinction? How do I see reactivity and responsiveness in myself, and my process, in my relations, in my impact on others? Reactivity usually refers to a... Is there something? I can hear you. Okay, good. Someone can hear me. Reactivity usually refers to a strong knee-jerk reaction. And it can include, strong emotions. It can also include shutdown or, denial. And responsiveness then involves a more considered approach, or something with a more careful assessment of intentions, values, and consequences. And responsiveness is also pointing to an inner process, and especially as my inner process unfolds into expression and relationality. When I'm reactive, I often don't feel like I'm fully in charge of my action. I'm being used by what's happening, and I may do things I regret. And reactivity does not need to refer only to immediate reactions. It can be quick. It can also be slow, or it can last, minutes, hours, days. Reactivity, in its kind of immediacy, usually lacks curiosity. While, responsiveness is like opening and embracing like ever-widening circles of inquiry, perspectives, considerations. And so it allows, for my values to be integrated into what I do. Reactivity can often involve stories of blame. Responsiveness involves, accepting responsibility, owning my part of what's happening. Reactivity may especially arise with challenging conditions, particularly like what's unexpected or unwanted. As Dojin spoke last week, here at Stone Creek, we're facing a kind of triple stress with the prolongation of the pandemic and its attendant tensions, confusion, chaos, the winding path of the renovation, and the uncertainties of the head priest search. And depending on our conditioning, we may each have, very specific triggers, and likewise specific kind of reactive formations. And so reactivity describes a whole territory of conditioning, a landscape of conditions and conditioned responses, some particular to my life, my family, or to where I grew up or when I grew up. And reactivity usually involves acting out our conditioning in ways that perpetuate that conditioning. So it's part of a status quo, working. Generally a kind of overall static situation. And responsiveness, we can likewise see that as like embodying a territory or a complex field or a path through the territory of reactivity, or a path of opening, a path of bringing light and awareness to this usually, like unconscious or automatic territory of reactivity. And responsiveness can then open into transforming that field. In terms of emptiness or the truth of relationship, I would also offer reactivity. In this context, we're looking at it, it's enacting and perpetuating separation. And Zen responsiveness, opening connection, actualizing relationality. And responsiveness flows from space-making practices. So responsiveness needs space, temporal and spatial space, social, emotional, conceptual, experiential space, and space to feel, wonder, question, inquire, and to move, and space around, my stories, my views, and memories. Space with my sensations, feelings, urges, pain, hurt. And a space or pause or disruption in the flow of disconnection, busyness, grasping, conditioning, suffering. And the stillness we practice in Zazen is not about becoming non-relational. I would offer part of it is a radical space-making practice. So here I want to bring up two closely related koans, or two koans which might be one koan, and they're from the Blue Cliff record, cases 14 and 15. And in both cases, monastic questions the human Zen teacher, Yunmen. Yunmen lived 862 to 949, and he taught in southern China. And here's the case. So a monk asked Yunmen, "What are the teachings of the Buddha's whole lifetime?" And Yunmen said, "An appropriate statement." I'm just going to put that koan in the chat here, since we can do that now. And so this response here, an appropriate statement. It's that's one translation. It's 3 kanji, 3 characters. Tai is the first, and that means facing, responding, answering, replying, a meeting. And the second character is ichi, which means one or someone. And the third character is setsu, which can mean statement, speak, talk, teach, preach, explain, express, and expound. And I'm also going to put that in the chat, those 3 characters and their meanings. Oh, let's see. There. And so an appropriate statement is then working with these 3 characters, facing, responding, meeting, one. Each one, or each particular situation, question, being, moment. So meeting, each one, statement, expression, teaching, talk. And so other translations could be a teaching in accordance, one preaching in response, talk facing each one, a fitting reply, speaking in tune with particular occasions. So many different possibilities here by various translators over the years. And so the question it's kind of a big question. What is the essence of the Buddha's whole life of teaching? In one sentence, please. And Yunmen points to this intimate responsiveness, or responsiveness which meets or accords with or is appropriate to each question, each seeking heart, or each moment, or each situation. Meeting each situation is meeting myself and meeting what's happening. It's opening to the conditions here and opening to my reactivity, my field of conditioning. And in these last few weeks, I've been seeing responsiveness, or examining responsiveness, especially in terms of softening with reactivity. So softening with and softening in what's happening. I'm softening especially with discomfort and pain. It's like soft belly, soft heart, soft neck, soft face, soft head, soft back, soft shoulders, soft hands. So this is to experience and really feel my pain, my discomfort, and also my grasping and clenching, and my defensive postures, all the ways I'm holding. And this is caring for the ground or body of responsiveness. It's a relational presence. And this is our zazen. It's being in touch, showing up fully, thoroughly, and also, soft, intimate presence. And coupled with this inner work, to actualize an appropriate response, an intimate response, or a real sense of connection, I need to show up. I need to be willing to manifest and expose something of what's in my heart and belly, and how things are sitting with me here. So, how connection is real for us in this moment is not a fixed thing. It's dynamic and relational, and appropriate responsiveness is less about knowing and more about this deep sense of inquiry and openness. Like, what is meeting? What is this? What is connecting? And making some space frees us up to, frees up a capacity to meet and accord. It gives us room. We need room to be, to move, to be flexible. And becoming a student of the relationship in this moment, inwardly and outwardly, this is where responsiveness can open. A few days ago, I was standing in our kitchen, in our house, and without warning, and our son Loka came up quietly behind me and jumped on my back. And a few days before this, we were in a grocery store, and Loka was jumping on my back repeatedly. And it was pretty fun. And I knew it was coming. And so because I knew it was coming, I could brace myself and receive it. And so he's 9 years old now. He has a lot of energy, a need for play, and a need for body-to-body physical contact, like vigorous horseplay. But at this moment, when I was standing in the kitchen, I was not bracing myself. And so he's getting big now. He's like 91 pounds. And so the body leaping and landing on my back unexpectedly. This was a surprise, a painful surprise, and I was actually, I think, worried that this could hurt me, this could injure me, and so I had an immediate reaction, ouch, get off, and a flash of anger, and kind of like and kind of a frame, a narrative or a story, sneak attack. I've been attacked. And so I noticed this anger, and so Loka got off my back, and then my first thought was I gotta find some space. So I wanted to pause before there was any more interaction, because I could feel I was not stable with my anger in that moment. And my anger and my not feeling safe or stable with my anger, that's part of my reactive field, part of my conditioning. And responsiveness is where I can interrupt the stream of passing on to Loka the conditioning I received when I was 9 years old. So I took a few steps into the kitchen, got some water, breathed in and out. And in that space, something more could open, than just the story that I'm being attacked. That I could see he wasn't attacking me, that he wanted to connect. And just like we connected a few days before in the frozen foods aisle. So in that space, I could open to something a little more complex. This felt like an attack. For him, it was a playful act. But the reactivity is often, it's reductive, or it's closed or limited, and it lacks imagination. And responsiveness does not negate the small story of the reactive field, but opens around it, to wider senses of what is happening. It's expansive and dynamic and actively engaging imagination. Imagination as a reality-seeking catalyst for living connection. And responsiveness is always a work in progress. It's open-ended, and it's relational and opening and entering a flow or a space of mutuality and reciprocity. And I feel reactivity is just like, let's get this done with and close it down and move on. And responsiveness is entering into something where you don't know where it's going because it's in relationship. I did not choose my conditioning. I did not choose my field of reactivity. But responsiveness unfolds with choosing to accept responsibility for my conditioning. Now it is mine. This is the reactive field I need to take care of. And with time, transform that field and release, old patterns of holding and heal old wounds. I also wanted to just point here to what I see of cancel culture as a form of collective reactivity. And, in cancel culture, something might be called out. And rather than engaging in conversations that may be challenging or uncomfortable, there's a reactive, like a snap judgment and a relegation. And it's sadly untransformative and non-restorative approach. So hurtful actions, harm, needs to be addressed. But this calling out, can just become a reactive response. Just like, let's shut this down. It's kind of shame-driven abandonment. And then this is why we sometimes talk about then calling in, pointing to a kind of more open, responsive, relational approach. Inviting each other to work together through, uncomfortable stuff. Because, we don't want to look at some of the ways that we're harming each other. It's uncomfortable. The vow is not turning my back on any being. And the old comments in the Blue Cliff record on this case, resonate for me with this. They include phrases like entering mud and water, to die and be born together with you, stretching out the body in the tiger's mouth, and following you for 1,000 or 10,000 miles. So I hear these now as Zen ways of talking about love. And it's not a safe or comfortable thing. Love here is walking through birth and death, holding hands together with all beings. And this is all about an appropriate statement. And so the second koan is case 15 in the Blue Cliff record. So the very next case, although I went to Yunmen's recorded sayings, and in his recorded sayings, these two stories are very far apart. So it doesn't seem like they necessarily happened in succession or on the same day. But the Blue Cliff record has put them right next to each other. And you'll see they're very, very close, actually. So a monk asked Yunmen, when it's not the present intellect and it's not the present phenomenon, what is it? And you could say, when it's not mind and it's not things, what is it? And Yunmen said, an upside down statement. And so his response here, and here I'll put that in the chat too, just like the other one. And it's also 3 kanji. And so the first kanji is to, and that means to topple, upset, turn over, inverted, mistaken. I'll put that in the chat. And then the second and the third kanji are exactly the same as the first case. So topple, upset, turn over, invert, mistaken, one. Each one, and then statement, expression, teaching, talk. So the first so they're very close. They're just one character, one word different. Tai isetsu, to isetsu. And so the other phrases, so this one, translating this one is a little more difficult. So an upside down statement, that's the Cleary's translation. Here are the other translations. Preaching in reverse, one teaching upside down, talk turning over each one. Turn that statement around, overturn this statement. And so it's, this is partially also because, this is just very dense language. So this one's a little more mysterious in some ways. Some commentaries, some of the traditional commentaries, say that the monk in this case is the same monk as in the previous case, and that this is sort of like a long-distance follow-up question. And so, an appropriate statement would fit, the present intellect and present phenomena. It would fit, what according with the circumstances here, but what's appropriate to ultimate truth? What's appropriate to Buddha nature, to something that's not actually the present circumstances? It's kind of the implication of the question. How do you meet that? Apart from mind, apart from things, what about that? And so one way of hearing Yunmen's an upside down statement is he's saying the monk's question is upside down, or this question is diluted, or this question needs to be turned over. Because the monk is trying to grasp at some ultimate truth apart from conventional truth, or it's some true nature or awakening apart from just the present circumstances. Just mind and things right here. That's it. And so it is like, Zen does emphasize, awakening or true nature can't be grasped or apprehended, in or through what's happening. But there's another piece of that, which is it's not actualized apart from what's happening. So just this. So this is part of responsiveness. Case 14 is about an appropriate statement or intimate responsiveness. And I offer that this case, an upside down statement or turning over each one, is about a liberative responsiveness. Or, it's pointing like responsiveness is intimate, and this intimacy involves a turning over, a releasing of grasping and limited views. And this is liberating. And so we could make this short and just say to get close and let go. And I like kind of putting these next to each other because might help us appreciate how getting close is not holding on, and letting go is not getting far away. And, responsiveness is getting close and letting go. Intimacy, a process of releasing grasping as a process of intimacy. And kind of like a one-word way of saying this in the way is softening. And that's how I hear softening. And this is all a paradigm of relationality. Holding on, getting far away, a paradigm of separation. There's an image in the verse for this koan of dividing one token, or dividing a tally. And this can refer to taking something whole, and it could be like a piece of bamboo, in ancient China, it could just be one word written on it, or like an agreement or a contract, and you take this piece of bamboo with something written on it, and you break it in two, and then these two pieces can separate, but they'll always fit together exactly. And so it's kind of like a way of each side having a way of recognizing each other or an agreement. And in relation to this question in the koan, I see this as kind of like a dynamic image of connectedness in differentiation. So intimacy is not about becoming like undifferentiated, right? Disappearing into oneness. And this is part of how an appropriate response arises. So it's not that we kind of become unified with what happens, and somehow then an appropriate response happens. It's also not that we kind of traverse separation to actualize a perfect meeting. But every meeting is two pieces of a divided tally or a token being rejoined. One of my triggers is being honked at when I'm driving a car. Someone beeping at me. And this is part of my reactive field. And it has like deep roots in my childhood and the kind of reactivity I experienced while being in a car. And now it's inside of me. And so when a beep or a honk comes, I experience a jolt. And if I look carefully, it's a jolt of, I'm not okay. Or I don't matter. And so I didn't choose this conditioning. But appreciating that it's actually not personal in that way of not choosing can be, I feel supported by that to accept it more fully. Like that this is my conditioning. I accept responsibility for this, and that my trying to hide it or deny it is not going to help. And so the jolt is pretty uncomfortable. And so there's this car honk, it's a trigger. And so how do I study this situation of a trigger? Sarah read me a quote recently as I was just thinking, we were sitting together in the living room by activist and professor Loretta Ross. And she said that, I think we overuse that word trigger when really we mean discomfort. And so I'm seeing a trigger as the uncomfortable tip of a kind of complex of conditioning. And working with my triggers then involves like a journey through rather than away from, my uncomfortable stuff. And this is vital to responsiveness, vital to, living in intimate relationality. And so the core pain or wound for me in this case is this jolt of not feeling okay, or not mattering, or feeling isolated. And I could react to this by seeing the car honk as an attack. And that this attack is causing this pain. But really, the car honk has nothing to do with this pain. The pain is totally my thing. Right? It belongs to me. And I belong to it. I could try to fix this pain in various ways. I might try to say, I am okay. But I feel like that can also be reactive. Or, any attempt, to control or manipulate, generally, reactive. And so what I find actually healing is intimacy, this softening, soft belly, soft heart, and breathing into it, allowing for some tender spaciousness. And what's healing is not to blame my pain on someone else or to try and talk over it, but to connect with it. And, at its root, it's a wound of disconnection. So reactivity as a paradigm of separation perpetuates, recreates, or deepens such a wound. So healing involves a paradigm shift, or like a turning over. This is part of how I resonate with like an upside down statement. Healing is a dynamic process in relation to the wound, in relation to hurt, pain, harm, disconnection, being wronged. Deep healing involves a paradigm shift from the conditions through which the wounding took place. So shifting to, connection. And then when I get honked at, rather than being driven by that beep, rather than my conditioning driving the car, I can drive the car. I can be in charge while driving the car and taking responsibility, for my conditioning, my pain, my discomfort. And Zazen is finding ourselves on a seat of connection and belonging and mattering in a true sense. And so you're intimately feeling the pain of I'm not okay, or I don't matter, or the pain of not belonging. Feeling that pain is sitting on the seat of connection. Healing is not in covering over or getting rid of or not feeling or avoiding pain or the wound. It's in this intimate, healing, liberative presence. And this is a process of, getting to know my triggers, getting to know what makes me uncomfortable and learning a different way of being with that. And seeing that they're in me. And so that I could actually welcome triggers and actually, or, expect the unexpected, and that there's not something going wrong in the universe. And I live in a world of triggering events. And I am also a part of this world for everyone else. So I and my actions can be triggering for others. And appreciating this is also part of responsiveness. The conditioning I don't illuminate shows up in my behavior. And so also in the karma of driving particularly, here again, I have an aspiration not to pass on the conditioning / reactivity / suffering to my son. To finish off here, I want to relate all this to the Four Noble Truths. So the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. And then reactivity can be a way of talking about the second noble truth, the cause of suffering, the field of conditioning. So basically, the traditional teaching, it's the afflictions of grasping and delusion and how through action they create a world of suffering, or how reactivity perpetuates a world of suffering for self and other. And responsiveness could then be a way of talking about the fourth noble truth of the path, which unfolds the third noble truth of liberation from suffering. And so responsiveness is not just an event, but a process and a path. And this resonated with me because I've been, in this talk, I've been, in this practice, looking at responsiveness in a way that's very multifaceted. And I feel this reflected then in the expositions of the path. So traditional frameworks include like the threefold training, ethics, meditation, and wisdom, or the eightfold path, which we studied a number of times, or the six paramitas, giving, ethics, patience, enthusiasm, meditation, wisdom. And I would offer these could be termed as threefold or sixfold or eightfold responsiveness. Reactivity shows us where we have work to do. And responsiveness is a way of talking about that intimate work. And it's not what we learn to do. It's learning something new. And I would offer this as lifelong, challenging work and vital work, bodhisattva work. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so are there any questions, comments, expressions? Please.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when these things arise, something happened to me this week in which I was told I couldn't get, it was something I needed medically. And I was told I couldn't get it. And it's something that I really, really needed. And it ended up working out. But there were 2 days where it did not work, where I really believed and wasn't sure I could make it without it. And I didn't sleep. My adrenaline was high. So I kept going back, trying to notice it. But I could not calm myself down.
Hmm.
So this is sort of, well, when you look at this, is sometimes is the practice being able just to be with it and watch it, or is it that you actually can calm yourself down?
Well, I would say that, calming ourselves down I would say, sometimes we can calm down, sometimes we can't. And it's an idea of something else that should be happening. And I would not want to see our practice as a tool that can calm us down no matter what. And that, sometimes you need to stay upset. And that's what's happening. And can you be soft? Can you be fully present in the midst of that? And that the intimate presence isn't trying to control what's happening into a different shape. Sometimes that's what'll happen. Sometimes it's always changing shape a little. Sometimes it changes shape a lot. But if it's only my grasping that's keeping me agitated, then if I release that grasping, maybe I might just become calm right then. But sometimes there's other things that are keeping us excited or in the agitated state. It's in some ways it's grasping, but there's other. If there's a health situation, you can release your grasping, and it's still a distressing situation. So you might not calm down. And so but I feel like the more we can study our grasping, whether we calm down or not, we can be more responsive, and it'll be a relief for us and our relations.
Thank you.
Morning. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
I was in a situation this week similar to yours but it was secondhand. I was riding in a car with a friend who's very, very sweet. And there was some cutoff situation where somebody, flipped him off and he got upset. But his reaction to it was so over the top that I didn't recognize. And my personal response was to just keep my mouth shut and let it pass. But I wondered also, I would feel very parental if I turned around and said to him, well, that was childish. Why did you do that? He's not a kid. And he's managed to get through his life to this far. What do you do with something like that? You just do what I did, which is nothing? Or do you somehow or another connect to it?
Well, I would say you could. I would say have an active inquiry. If people are in an intense reactive state, they might not be very receptive. So you might not say anything at that moment if you don't feel like it's going to be helpful. Mm-hmm. But kind of like the frame I would have would be like, well, what could be, the inquiry would be like, what could be a helpful, what could be my helpful response? Whereas like saying like that's childish, that could be my reactivity. And so then so then once you have reactivity, reacting to reactivity, that's how, things can generally just continue to be messy. So what's the way of making a connection?
Yeah. I mean, where I grew up, part of it is where I grew up, if you did something like that, you're liable to get shot. And so it's a personal safety as well as a reactivity issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, people do really crazy things in their cars when they get upset. I see stuff happening that's, amazing.
Right.
And that's part of the reason I wanted to bring this up.
So I'm getting the idea that reactivity is not a good thing, and I'm thinking about all of you having these sort of responses to road rage, or I shouldn't say responses, but reacting to that. And, you know, and there are people who are driving that are driving dangerously or whatever. And I don't feel like I should be having to have kind of a response to that. I think I'm okay in my reaction. So is reaction, I mean, I'm not going to think about how he had a poor childhood or something like that. So, you know, is reaction ever legitimate?
Well, I mean, it just depends on how you define the words, you know. So one of the ways I was offering to contrast the two words was that, well, I mean, anyway, I offered various things, but often with reactivity, you would not be in charge of what you're doing. And so, you know, that doesn't mean that what you're doing is going to be unhelpful. It's still possible that you would have a helpful reaction. You know, and some of reactivity is also based on, you know, it's just based on survival mechanisms where, you know, we have conditioning that's meant to be faster than we could think, because sometimes you need that. So it's like, you know, you probably can't get rid of these kind of reflex things. But, you know, I would say that, you know, in my field of reactive conditioning, I see it as all, you know, what I see is a field of, you know, conditioning that's all, you know, coming from and enacting, perpetuating a belief in separation. So that, you know, I think we can have very fast responsiveness. So responsiveness doesn't have to be slow, especially if I'm already in touch with myself. Something sudden happens, I can be very responsive right in that moment. But I think that maybe for me, the thing is, you know, if I'm fully intimate and fully being myself, then, you know, responsiveness is happening. And so then that's where, you know, you could have something like spontaneity, which is something that, you know, Zen sort of values sometimes, you know, in the koans. But I would say that's not reactivity. I would call it responsiveness. But it's because there's, you know, it can arise when you're thoroughly grounded before the event. Or maybe you get grounded right as it happens.
Yeah, I keep thinking what I'm seeing you doing is you're having this immediate reaction as the guy comes screaming up behind you and then swerves around you. You have this immediate reaction, and then you're going, you know, damn would be your response because the guy's driving unsafely. So it's like almost both of them are happening at the same time.
Well, I think I would offer that. Well, that part of what I wanted to emphasize actually is that responsiveness is not getting rid of reactivity, and that's actually a reactive approach to reactivity. Responsiveness is becoming intimate with the whole reactive field, and that's part of how it's transformative. We can't just have a bunch of judgments about reactivity that are just reactive judgments, and they won't serve us. You know, we're not going to judge our way out of reactivity. We're going to soften, you know, an intimate presence through the reactivity.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. This is Scott.
Hey.
I'm wondering with a couple of questions that you've gotten regarding road rage and your own experience with horns, whether or not there might be a place for you with the Department of Motor Vehicles in helping people to deal with various driving behaviors. I just wanted to share my tool, I guess it is, to dealing with responsiveness and reactivity. And you use the word trigger a number of times, and yeah, maybe it's overused, but I have discussed the word trigger in therapy, so it is a sort of a valid, whatever concrete concept in behavioral science. My technique is simply this: whenever I feel being triggered, something of that nature, I don't know, I've conditioned myself, or I've practiced, or I've learned. Most of the time I've learned how to immediately zero in on my breath and my diaphragm. And I find this helps me to sort of diffuse the kind of situation that you said, where one reaction triggers another reaction, and then the situation can devolve into unskillful speech. So I find that taking a breath and focusing on my diaphragm and just breathing in and thinking before I open my mouth, kind of like Steve's question to you about, what would he do? Reprimand the driver, and that'd be sort of a child parent reprimand. And what did he do? Keep his mouth shut? I don't know what is the best response, but thanks for opening up this sort of field of inquiry for us this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, well, I think taking a breath, that's what I meant, or that I would include that in what I talked about as a space making practice. So taking a breath, feeling the breath, breathing into my experience in this moment, being various ways of creating some space. And
yeah, that space making moment, I think that you're referring to, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, Chongyang Trungpa's book, Beyond Spiritual Materialism. He speaks about this, this moment of a gap, I think is what he calls it, is a gap when there's a conversation that the bodhisattva will wait just a second before responding to something that was just said, and creating that space, that gap, like you're saying.
It's cutting through spiritual material.
Cutting through.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you.
What this reminds me of is, and we're pretty much beyond this stage, most of us, but when you're raising kids, that I always remember they say, something is triggering you and you count to 10.
Yeah.
It's always the big deal with, just count to 10 and then make it react.
It can help. Unless you get triggered by counting to 10.
Because people tell you to count to 10.
So, Charlie, I had the image with you with Loki jumping on your back. It's kind of like the, I don't know, the Zen master and Little Grasshopper or something. It's like where you always have to be alert for the samurai, waiting.
Yes.
So I'm curious, did you get back to him? Were you able to include him in, like, this is appropriate, this isn't appropriate, or did you just own the process for yourself? I mean, I'm curious.
Oh, I circled back and talked to him about it, and he actually, I think he could see that, he apologized to me later on, because I think maybe with Sarah's help, I don't know. I think he could see that he had taken me off guard, and I think we just visited the point of, like, if I'm not bracing, if I don't know what's coming, it could hurt me.
We're old,
just because he's like, he's a 91, 91 pounds of boy flying at your body can be really hurtful. So yeah, he's also, like, I think when he was little, he couldn't hurt us, and so we would wrestle, and he would completely exert himself, and now he's getting strong enough that he needs to learn how to be aware of what he could do to my body with his strength. And so this is like an ongoing conversation.
It's like the Kung Fu movie. Watch
But there is a way. There can be a way in which it's like, yes, you never know when
he's going to come out of the corner. Thank you. That's fun.
All right. That seemed good. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So let me get the vows. Okay. For great bodhisattva vows means are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it.